Qatar is a state smaller than Connecticut, yet it owns vast swaths of central London, spent $200 billion to host a World Cup, and manages to host a massive American military base alongside the political leadership of Hamas and the Taliban. How does a highly vulnerable country, surrounded by regional giants, engineer itself into a hub of global influence? To understand the strategy, you have to look at the region's original economy. In the 1920s, Qatar was a barren peninsula where thousands of families relied on the brutal work of pearl diving. Then, a Japanese entrepreneur perfected the cultured pearl. The market for natural pearls collapsed within years, plunging Qatar into a famine so severe that some survivors recalled boiling locusts just to find a meal. That collapse taught the state its most important lesson. Relying on a single, vulnerable industry leaves a nation entirely at the mercy of outside forces. By 1971, Qatar discovered the North Field, the largest reservoir of natural gas on Earth. But energy companies like Shell eventually walked away from the concession. The problem was physics. In the 1970s, natural gas required pipelines to a direct neighbor. Qatar's only land border is Saudi Arabia, which already had vast energy supplies. They couldn't pipe gas through a rival and couldn't ship it. Qatar was geographically locked. The country found itself sitting on a massive energy reserve it had no way to move. With their modest oil wells already projected to dry up, they were effectively racing against time to monetize the gas before the money ran out. In 1995, Sheikh Hamad seized power in a bloodless coup. He decided to mortgage the entire country, taking on $70 billion in debt to invest in a technology that most oil majors still viewed as a massive risk: liquefied natural gas, or LNG. LNG works by cooling natural gas to minus 162 degrees Celsius. At that temperature, it condenses into a liquid, and its volume shrinks by about 600 times. This shrinkage meant the gas could finally be loaded onto ships. Qatar commissioned an entirely new class of skyscraper-sized supertankers called Q-Max vessels, allowing them to bypass regional pipelines and sell to anyone on the planet. Ironically, it was Japan, the country that once destroyed the pearl trade, that became the critical first buyer. Their long-term contracts provided the guaranteed revenue Qatar needed to unlock global bank financing. Liquefying gas was an engineering solution to a geographic prison, allowing Qatar to export its wealth without asking its neighbors for permission. As gas revenue exploded in the 2000s, the state created the Qatar Investment Authority. Its mandate was to convert finite gas revenue into permanent ownership of global assets. Qatar focused on systemic, high-visibility Western infrastructure. They became a primary landlord in London, acquiring major stakes in Canary Wharf, Heathrow Airport, and the luxury department store Harrods. Capital provides returns, but media provides a voice. By funding Al Jazeera, Qatar disrupted the sterile, state-controlled media landscape of the Middle East, giving the tiny state a massive presence in regional political debates. Then they secured their safety through a strategic contradiction. While sharing their primary gas field with Iran, they simultaneously built the Al Udeid Air Base, which now hosts roughly 8,000 American personnel and the forward headquarters of U.S. Central Command. Qatar engineered a state of indispensability. If the country vanished, Western property markets would shake, U.S. military command would lose its regional hub, and the world's most critical energy supply chain would break. In 2017, that strategy was put to the test. Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Egypt severed all ties and closed the land border, effectively cutting off 40% of Qatar's food imports overnight to force the country into submission. Qatar responded by using its capital to build new trade routes instantly. They bypassed Saudi airspace, absorbed the higher fuel costs, and accelerated the launch of a deep water port to import directly from Turkey and Oman. The most visual act of defiance was the Cow Airlift. To replace Saudi dairy imports, Qatar purchased thousands of Holstein cows from Europe and the US and flew them into the desert on cargo planes to build a self-sufficient, air-conditioned dairy industry in the middle of the sand. The blockade failed. Instead of surrendering its foreign policy, Qatar used the crisis to rewire its economy, proving that its engineered independence could survive even a total regional lockout. Qatar's ultimate display of soft power arrived in 2022. They spent $200 billion, a figure larger than any previous tournament, to build a World Cup infrastructure from nothing. But the construction exposed the human cost of Qatar's rapid rise. The kafala labor system, which tied migrant workers to their employers, led to thousands of deaths in extreme heat, often without any meaningful compensation for their families. Under intense global scrutiny, Qatar introduced labor reforms, including a minimum wage and the right to change jobs, to satisfy Western partners, while the tournament itself provided the state with a viral, global branding moment. Wealth and visibility provided Qatar with security, but they also permanently ended the country's ability to operate in the shadows. Today, Qatar faces a new existential threat: the global shift away from fossil fuels. They know that gas is a bridge, not a final destination. They are now pivoting to the post-gas future. They are investing heavily in the plumbing of the digital economy, AI and data centers, and have built Education City, importing campuses from elite Western universities like Georgetown and Cornell to manufacture a native knowledge economy. Qatar's leadership remembers the 1920s. They know what happens when a country relies on a single industry that the world no longer needs, and they are racing to diversify before the gas market follows the pearl trade. In a landscape ruled by giants, a tiny state doesn't survive by being lucky. It survives by becoming so deeply entangled in the global system that the rest of the world cannot afford to let it fail.